In his third adventure, Indiana Jones joins his father in the quest to uncover the Holy Grail, which features the biggest set pieces of the franchise so far. So let us take a look at Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I'm like a bad penny. I always turn up.
This is a movie podcast. We are working through the Indiana Jones franchise, building up, of course, to Dial of Destiny, the fifth one that is about to come out. But we are here for entry number 3, which is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So we'll get into it. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we do spoilers. And we'll talk about, the cast, we'll talk about the plot, we'll talk about all the different things. We'll work through it, all the usual stuff. So, this one, obviously, Temple of Doom, bit divisive. We were relatively negative on it, I would say.
I was going to say, I thought you were about to end that sentence with positive, and I was like, do I have to bring up the score sheet, Pete? Because I can tell you for certain that you were not.
No. We were relatively negative. I'm just trying to sugarcoat it a little bit, that's all. But, I think Last Crusade is generally considered a good sequel, probably the best sequel of the bunch. I kind of remembered that, although it's been a long time since I've seen this, but this one's about the search for the Holy Grail. Sean Connery's here as Indy's father. So that is a thing. We also have Nazis again. We also have Brody back from the first movie, as well as Sala, which is John Rhys-Davies' character.
Yeah, that one caught me off guard when he showed back up again. I mean, I saw him in the opening credits, but I was still amazed that they just threw him in the middle with like very little pomp and circumstance. He's just here now.
I felt kind of bad for Marion, because she's like the only character from the first movie who's not...
Oh, don't worry, Pete. We'll get Marion back soon.
Oh, I know she's in Crystal Skull, but it kind of feels like just shitty at the time. In 1989 when this came out, they made some choices that I don't know if it seems very fair. Admittedly, there is at least a flirtation with someone else in this, so I suppose they didn't want to murky the waters or anything.
They already had the father-son story. They didn't need a love triangle thrown in there as well.
Yeah, so this is 1938 this is set in, so still before World War II, which is interesting. It's still a year before that, but we're very much in kind of the build-up to that, and, as with the first movie and the idea that Hitler wants to find things that will help him rule the world, now he wants the Holy Grail as opposed to the Ark of the Covenant. And that is very much what the plot of this is all about. And it turns out Henry Jones is kind of like his expertise is in medieval and Christianity artifacts and things like that. So he's still archaeology, but more specific. So he's already kind of involved, and then Indy's brought in to get involved as well. And the plot kind of goes from there. So, there's big set pieces, there's puzzle elements, there's all sorts of things going on. We'll get into it. But David, without any further ado, how did you feel about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade?
So this is by far the one that I just had the least sitting in my head already. Like, Raiders of the Lost Ark, like, everyone's seen it, everyone knows it, you got the beats. Temple of Doom, I knew strictly through cultural osmosis and, like, 1 or 2 viewings way, way long ago. Last Crusade, I watched maybe once. And I say maybe because there were a bunch of scenes in this movie that I don't remember at all. Like, completely under my radar. But then, by the time we get to, like, the third act, all of that seemed very familiar. So, with all that being said, not having a lot going into it, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a blast. I do think that the Indiana Jones franchise as a whole keeps getting more... The word zany comes to mind. And this does not disappoint that trend, because there is a lot of hijinks. There is a lot. I think this is the most, just by dialogue, like number of lines, this is the most Indiana Jones has spoken compared to the last 2 films combined. Like, he doesn't shut up in this movie. And it's because he keeps on having these back and forths with his dad that are very hijinksy, very comedic the whole way through. The action is still there, don't get me wrong. And I think that this one, whereas the first 2 were very as we compared them to serials, very much a collection of this and then this and then this. This one felt the most cinematic. Like, it had the most overarching plot, and you couldn't really take out any individual scene without upsetting the flow of the entire movie. So overall, gonna give it a positive, but it does have its faults.
Yeah, I kind of agree and disagree with what you said there about it. I think it does have those hijinks, right? It's absolutely got the hijinks that Raiders didn't. Raiders was a more serious, straight. Obviously, it had some comedy beats. Don't get me wrong. We're not saying it didn't, but it was definitely a lot more serious than this. Whereas this has comedy beats in the middle of the action set pieces. It has, all these little things. That said, though, I don't think it's as silly as Temple. I think Temple, things like the life raft, things like that, were just the actual zany moments in the action were just a bit more absurd. Not that there's none in this, but I do think this one, like, it reins that in. But like you say, it does have a lot more back and forth dialogue. But this one, I think, because it goes back to the university, it goes back to setting up the plot. It feels thematically relevant to the first one because once again, it's Nazis wanting an artifact, and Indy gets involved and all the rest of it. It feels like it spends time setting up his plot and doing all this stuff. So I think it feels like a true sequel to the first movie in a way that Temple of Doom kind of didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And not so much that I felt that at the time watching Temple of Doom, but I think in hindsight it feels really like the odd one out of the original three. I mean, obviously once we bring in Crystal Skull and stuff, we can...
And then we'll get the pentology, and we'll see how that ends up.
But when this was a trilogy, when I first watched these, Crystal Skull didn't exist yet. Temple of Doom did feel like the weird one in the middle, and this felt like a true sequel. And not just because it brings characters back, but just because it felt more kind of like... Although, one of the things I was noticing as I was watching it is I'm a big fan of Uncharted, the video game series. And we, of course, did the movie some time ago. And
yes, we did.
I was noticing that a lot of the inspirations it probably took from Indiana Jones were probably more from this movie than any other entry. Stuff like looking at the little notepad that's got all the clues in it, and figuring out puzzles and looking for Roman numerals. That's a lot of what you do in the puzzles in those early games. So that really stuck out to me watching this again, because I don't think I've watched this since I've played all those games. So meaning that I've not watched this since before 2007, basically.
Yeah, this movie is the first one where I felt like the puzzles pretty much throughout the movie were laid out in a way that the audience could follow along. The best way I could say it is the sort of detective novels where they give you all the clues and you can, as the audience, get to the point before the detective does. I think that this is the first movie where...
Well, some of the stuff at the end, I would say that not all of them, because there's the stuff early on where you can follow along, but when he's figuring out the numbers in the library, you can't solve any of that as an audience member. You understand what he's doing, but you can't say, oh, I know where this, where he's going to find the thing,
Yeah, I guess. I guess it's more so that they spend more time after they forecast it to the point where they actually solve it. For instance, at the very beginning with the Roman numerals, there's a point where they look at the other Roman numerals and they're like, where's this third one? And then Indy looks down at the ground briefly, and then it's not until 20 seconds later that we actually get the reveal to the audience. But obviously as soon as he looks down, the audience will be like, oh, it's on the floor. Hey guys, I figured it out.
Yeah, so it's definitely got something that I think Temple of Doom was lacking. It also has an entertaining co-star in Sean Connery.
Yes,
their back and forth is by and large pretty entertaining. Something that the annoying character of the last movie did not have with Indy. They were going for it. They were going for that thing with Willie where they had this back and forth, but it didn't quite have...
See, I would have compared this more, just because I've always seen there being the sidekick and the love interest. And Marion was the only one who split that line, who managed to do both of them. I would consider Sean Connery to be more of the short round.
Sure, but that doesn't still feel quite right, though.
No, it doesn't.
Because he isn't really... He's got a very different character to everyone else. I think I compare him more to the love interest, because that's the one that he had the back and forth with more. Yes, he talked to short round, obviously, but the sort of the supposed to be charming back and forth wasn't with him. It was with...
That was supposed to be charming?
It was supposed to be. I'm not saying it was.
That? Oof.
But
I do want to point out, though, that does bring up a good point. This movie never feels like it's recycling its side characters. It never feels like we're getting the exact same guy just with a different name. They always feel like their own specific slot. Whether you like them or not, they are their own characters.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I like the movie. I never really got around to saying that. I like it a bit. It is the best of the sequels. I don't think it's as good as Raiders, for, a few of the reasons that we've kind of already alluded to, which is it's a bit zanier. Even though some of the zaniness, I do think it works better than Temple. It works more in context in this movie than almost anything in Temple did that was zany.
Yeah, I could see that.
At the very least, they set a thing up. Okay, it's kind of zany, but then they use it. So they establish a thing, like say a trap door, and then they'll use that trap door a few times for the comic effect, and it works because they've actually set it up and they play it off, as opposed to, just the fish out of water humor or whatever else they might have had last time.
Yeah, I will say there is one point in this movie, which I won't spoil how we get there, but there's a scene where one character runs into a building, and then all of a sudden the facade of the building closes and turns out it was just the back of a truck. That just felt like a Looney Tunes. Like I've seen that Looney Tunes moment. That has definitely been the most hijinksy that I think it really gets without reusing it as an actual plot point, like you're saying, the trapdoors and whatnot.
Yeah. No, that's fair. There's definitely examples in here, which is why I do think I definitely don't hold it as highly as I do Raiders. The other thing would probably be the pacing is good in this, but I wouldn't say it's as tight as Raiders.
No, definitely not.
So I would say that. And the action also very good. Like, there's some fun stuff, especially later on. There's some interesting set piece like locations and moments. But I wouldn't say that any of the bigger major ones, again, live up to the best ones in Raiders. But as a sequel to that film, if you want more of Indiana Jones and you want more of the character, you want another adventure, this is definitely, I think, more of a good follow-up to it, where it takes it a little bit further. It does some slightly different things with it. It has a personal story with Indy and his father and whatever they've got going on, and that's kind of the heart of the movie. That's the real story of it. I am going to critique the opening a little bit, which is the backstory of Indy when he's a teenager. Well, I'll save it for spoilers, but I'll just say it goes a little bit over the top with how many things happen in the span of about an hour of his life. That's all I'm just going to say.
See, that's how I felt about the entire last act of Temple of Doom. It was just too much for one night to hold, and yet there we were.
Oh, I get what you're saying, but this is different because this is the prequelitis problem, and this movie's not a prequel, but this opening scene of it, Last Crusade, is kind of what has become the franchise vomit prequel, where all it is we have to fit in all the references to the things from later on.
Oh yeah.
Right? There's just too much of that. Like, you can have one, you can get away with one.
See, that's the one thing, and I mean, is it really a spoiler if it's in the first, 5 minutes? But the one thing that I never quite understood George Lucas's, or whoever it is behind the scenes, obsession with is explaining why their characters have scars that the actors just legitimately have. Because they took a whole segment out of Empire Strikes Back to explain, here's why Mark Hamill looks slightly different after his car crash. It's like, no, he can just look different. You can just have that. And then in this movie, they took time to explicitly say, here's why Harrison Ford has a scar on his chin.
I don't think I've ever noticed that scar, to be honest.
Yeah, neither have I, but they took the time to explicitly say it. And I'm like, maybe you're just going a bit too in-depth there.
Yeah, it's just been a bit too cute. And I think that's fundamentally, and obviously Star Wars are very guilty of this because of the prequels and all the rest of it, but it's something we see a lot now with legacy sequels and having to over-reference every little detail. But I'll get into the specifics when we get into spoilers. But that said, though, I was kind of dreading that opening sequence or extended sequence, which is about...
I remember you were hard on that before we got into this.
Which is a good 10 minutes long. It's like a short film, effectively. So, instead of the end of the previous adventure that the last two movies had, we get this backstory instead, which is its own little adventure. I think it's not as bad as I was expecting, but I still have some just sort of objective critiques of it. that I think is only worse as Hollywood has become more guilty of what this is guilty of. So it sticks out even more in a modern viewing. But, I think the villains are good. Not as good as Raiders. I think that's actually kind of my running thing that I'm saying here, is that everything in this is pretty good. There's very few things that I don't like. It's just that none of the stuff that's good is quite as good as Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an unfair bar to hold it to as well, because obviously Raiders, they just kind of caught lightning in a bottle and managed to make it work for them. This one, I think it's trying so many, because when Temple of Doom came out, obviously it's a completely different thing. We're dealing with a different mythology. We're in a different part of the world, different characters, more or less. This one is trying to do so many things that Raiders did in the original, but it's still just not able to capture that same essence again, because while they are trying to do the same things, they are trying to make it its own movie, which good for them. I don't just want to see Raiders again. But,
yeah, of course, yeah.
But yeah, it's an issue of every little change you make brings it down. I don't think they've at any point in that movie did they make a change that really elevated this movie to its own unique thing, save for one that I think they did fantastically on, but that is a definite spoiler, so I will hold off on that.
Yes, indeed. No, like, the set pieces are good, characters are good, by and large. Maybe it gets a little zany in places than I would have liked. But, that's basically, it's a really solid, good sequel, which, plays off everything Raiders does and does its own sort of spin on it. And fundamentally, it deserves to be compared because it's a sequel. You have to compare it to the previous movies. It would be ridiculous not to.
That's the whole point of this show, more or less. It's just comparing all these things that are so similar.
But it's good stuff. So much better than Temple. And I know, again, the divisiveness of Temple is that some people think it's the best one, and they're going to be mad at I'm saying that. But even just early on, as soon as it cuts to the university and he's talking to his class, and it's setting up what he's going to do next, it's this feels like a sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, as opposed to, and that's not to say that you have to go back there, you have to have a similar setup that film did, but it just immediately grounds it and feels like you're back with that character. So before he goes off on the completely new adventure, you just sort of ground it a little bit and okay, this is to make you feel comfortable, and now we're going to shake you up by having him go off and do something different than he's done before. And there are some elements to this that do shake it up a bit, and we'll talk about those as we go through the spoilers.
Yeah. Which I do wonder if maybe that's the reason that the opening sequence is kind of not something that we enjoyed as much, is because it's a completely brand new thing. I mean, it's a different actor, obviously, playing young Indy. It's nobody that we've ever met before in a location that we are unfamiliar with. And the only thing that we have in common are just kind of these tropes, like you said, these things that they're calling ahead to, rather than actually building up,
To be fair to it, I do actually think there's some smart little creative choices in how it plays out and how it's directed at the start of that opening section. Something as simple as, so it spends some time doing the opening titles, which I noted were a lot more muted. You could remember Temple had the big Indiana Jones logo. This has got more of just a sort of basic kind of font, and it's very restrained. But, the titles are playing out, and we're seeing people ride across the desert, and then it's oh, wait, no, they're kids. And it's okay, it's like a little swerve almost, and then it's a little swerve that one of the kids is Indy. I don't think that's a spoiler, because we're saying it's his backstory.
What?
Right? And then it's a little swerve that this thing. I feel like it does this sort of it keeps sort of pulling the rug out from you just a little bit, not like a major way, but just a little bit. And it's a really smart way to keep dropping you further in. Where it falls down is when it starts to and here's how Indy gets all these things, or learns all these things, or does all these things that are going to be important later.
It's weird how his entire life was defined over the course of exactly 35 minutes.
Yes, it's very, very strange, but. I do think there's good direction there, and I think the direction by and large is something I like more in this one than I did in Temple as well. I think something about it is, I feel like when they made Temple, they got to it relatively quick. It came out in 1984, Raiders was 1981. Spielberg went away and made E.T. in between those, and maybe something else.
It's a little film, no one even knows.
Yeah, so it was a relatively quicker thing, and not that Spielberg wasn't making movies for the rest of the 80s like before this one, but I feel like from a writing standpoint, at least, like it feels like more thought went into this, and
yeah, I can see that. By the way, just looking at Spielberg's credits here, E.T. was between Raiders and Temple of Doom, at least release-wise. Between Temple of Doom to Last Crusade, he did The Color Purple, on Empire of the Sun, and Always.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then followed it up immediately afterwards with Hook and then Jurassic Park. So,
yeah. That's kind of an interesting like mid-80s there, didn't he? He sort of went away from adventure movies, and then this was his comeback to them. Yeah,
more or less.
So,
and then after that, he started doing a bunch of war. All the war.
And he's still dipping into that occasionally these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's very good. Obviously, the score is great, as it has been throughout. Williams knows what he's doing.
I was going to say, at this point, it's just a moot point. Like, we would only be able to comment if the score is actually crap. It's just expectedly good.
Yeah, I'm like, it plays on the right ways at all the right moments. It brings in old themes when it feels right to bring them in. Obviously, the main theme plays at some key moments. I don't have a whole lot to say. I'm sure someone who does music theory could come in and sit and dissect the whole thing and talk about it.
Let me tell you why this G note defines Indiana Jones.
So, yeah, I guess we'll just get the spoilers then, so we can start talking about everything properly. So, spoilers for Last Crusade from this point on. You have been warned. As we said, starts with the opening with the young version of Indy, but it does a little thing where it's not until the other kid says Indy or Indiana that you realize, oh, this is Indy. And it then swerves you by saying, oh, Indy's not afraid of snakes, which honestly is all you had to like. Just knowing that young Indy wasn't afraid of snakes yet is enough of a fun little bit. It's like, oh, that's interesting. That's something along the way made him scared of snakes. The fact that we see what that moment is like 5 minutes later is where it feels a bit hokey.
I actually stopped the movie at that point, turned to my girlfriend and was just like, was that it? Was that he was not afraid of anything at all. And then all it took was this one, to just clarify, he's running through a circus train. We'll get there as to how. And he falls into a basically tub of snakes, which don't get me wrong. Anybody else, I get it. I 100% understand. If you have a phobia after that point, yeah, no problem. But for Indiana Jones himself, like, he also encounters, like, he's trapped in a lion's cage on that circus train. He has no phobia of lions. I'm just wondering why the snakes was the one thing that stuck with him out of that entire ordeal.
Because it was icky or so. What do you want from me? But you also obviously have him kind of like seeing this archaeologist / thief, right?
Grave robber.
They're still in this cross, right? And he's like, that belongs in a museum. That's kind of his catchphrase of this movie. That belongs in a museum. But this guy's got the Indy hat on, right? He's got a leather jacket. You're like, okay, so this is who he's going to kind of like model his look after. He's going to like this guy in some way. And sure enough, he steals the cross. He tells his buddy to go get the police or whatever, and it leads to this chase where he runs out of this circus train. They're going over the roofs of the train. He falls into the snakes, as you said. He falls into the lion's pit, and this is the point where, like, to fight off the lion, he turns and sees a whip. And this is the moment where I'm just sort of rubbing my temple. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, the fear of snakes, these witnessing someone who looks like himself again, he's a grave robber, but like, but his version of it. And then the whip, all taking place. And of course, the whole time I'm thinking, like, he's going to end up with that hat, isn't he, by the end of this?
Oh, no doubt.
Of course he is. And sure enough, he gets away. He actually outsmarts everyone, which impresses the guy with the hat, which, by the way, this character is listed as Fedora in IMDb.
That's his name?
That's what he's listed as, Fedora.
That's a good name.
But yeah, so everyone shows up at his house when he goes back to tell his dad that he's got this cross, this artifact from them, and the police make him hand it back over, and they give it to this guy in a white suit who's paid them off to steal it for him, and it's all, so it's, it's corruption, whatever. But the big thing at the end of the scene is that Fedora leans in and sort of says, okay, you lost today, kid, but that doesn't mean you have to keep losing or like it. and he takes off his fedora and gives it to him, and then it transitions to like present day Indy. Well, I'll say present day, 1938 Indy.
Transitions to 2023 Indy, a dead corpse on the ground.
Right.
So during that sequence, one thing I did want to bring up is that young Indy is played by River Phoenix, who obviously was an up-and-coming star before tragically passing away, and is brother of Joaquin Phoenix. I think he did an all right job, but I do kind of wish that the producers would have been like, okay, kid, you got the role, but just cut your hair. Just, please. It's 1912 at this point. The fact that he has as long of hair as he does, I don't feel like just fits the time in general.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. I mean, Indy was a rebellious kid.
Oh, obviously, yeah. He as established throughout this movie, he had both mommy and daddy issues. I get it. But I still think just for the time, it doesn't really fit.
I mean, his dad makes him count in Latin. Or was it Greek?
That's the other thing.
It was something like that. Yeah.
This is our first... we don't actually see him, but this is our first run-in with Indy's dad. And he's already completely balls deep in on the Holy Grail quest and all that, and when Indy comes in and tries to tell him, hey, I just stopped this from being looted, we can take this to the museum and get it put in there, his dad doesn't even look at him and just tells him, start counting in Latin. So I think it sets up already that father-son dynamic very early on, so that by the time we get to it later in the movie, it's more present in our heads rather than figuring it out.
The setting up of the father-son dynamic's fine, and that's really the purpose of the whole thing. They just wanted to give you this young Indy adventure and all the origin beats, and it's the fact that he gets all of his key origins out of all, you can have him realize this is his first taste of going on an adventure and have him fighting for his life, and you can have one of the other things. You can have either the whip, you can have maybe the hat, or you can have the fear of snakes and how he gets that fear. You can't get all three. You can't even get two of them. Even two feels hokey. It feels just silly.
I fully imagine there being some version of the script where they're like, oh, by the way, that girl down the street, Marion, called.
Yeah, they would so do that now. Young teenage Marion would come in and saying, hey, Indy. Which wouldn't even make sense because she's so much younger, as we pointed out in the first movie.
Yeah, but they'd still do it because they need to have that name recognition.
Or would it be even worse? Would the neighbors walk down with their crib, or not a crib? Sorry,
that would be so weird.
Their stroller, and they're like, "Oh, this is our baby Marion."
And you just see Indy smiling down at the crib, and then all the audience's spines just shiver a little bit.
He imprints on the crib. On the baby.
Oh God!
I keep saying crib. It's not a crib.
It's a stroller. It's a buggy, whatever you want to call it.
Well, it's not a pram in the UK. I keep trying to think of the American word. I keep saying crib just by default.
Yeah.
So the end of the story that we get a little glimpse of at the end of an adventure, which is Indy getting after this cross, and the guy in the white suit still has it. And he has a little bit of an action in a boat where the water's crashing out of the boat, and he ends up jumping off, and the boat explodes. And
I it is an impressive explosion, but it also feels completely unearned. In the process of the scene, it's just all of a sudden Indy jumps off and the boat just explodes.
Oh no, there's a quick shot of why it explodes though, isn't there?
It's like there's crates labeled explosives, but that's still cheap.
I mean, it is, yes, but it's better. I'm just saying, some movies would just have the boat explode.
Oh yeah, no, it's the same thing with a car going off a cliff has to explode.
Yes,
even if it doesn't make any sense. I get it. I understand they set it up a little bit, but it still feels like, hey, we have this boat exploding prop. How do we make it work in the script?
To be fair, later on when a tank goes over a cliff, it doesn't explode.
And I was waiting for it too. I was sitting there and go, go.
There's a freaking Zeppelin in this movie, and there's no explosions on that either.
I genuinely believed that Indiana Jones is going to be responsible for the Hindenburg.
The thought crossed my mind, I have to admit.
I was just waiting for them to zoom out from the blimp, and they say "Oh, was that the Hindenburg leaving?"
Now, correct. I could be completely wrong here. I didn't get the impression. I'm assuming this is a purely fictional thing, but maybe I'm wrong. Did did Germany actually use Zeppelins in any sort of commercial travel before the Hindenburg disaster? Was that something that they were actually using?
Well, here's the thing. The Hindenburg happened before 1938, so actually that would have predated this. However, yes, they were also using them in mild forms of travel. Obviously, it is wildly inefficient, though. So
yeah, okay. Yeah, so it's nonsense anyway. But just the idea that they've got this like first class like dining room style area that they're on a Zeppelin.
I mean, I have plenty to talk about when it comes down to
which to be fair, I enjoyed this setting. I'm not complaining. I enjoyed the Zeppelin setting. If we're going to do a bit of zaniness, then having a Zeppelin is exactly the sort of thing that I can get on board with.
Yeah, I mean, this movie, the first movie was set in, the Middle East generically.
Well,
this one was the first one to really be set in Germany, and I feel like they really played up all the German tropes, like as many as they could get away with in the script.
Well, we got a variety. We got Venice as well, of course. First, that was a big chunk, and then we got Germany, and then we got, I don't know, the desert somewhere. I wasn't even sure. I mean, it's even a plot point. Like, what city did they start their journey to the Holy Grail?
Alexandrite, something like that.
I will take your word for it. So, yeah, all right. So, I mean, basically, Indys just taken by some men in suits.
Yeah, we get the whole thing inside of the university. He shows off that he got the cross. They're putting in the museum. He goes back to his office. For some reason, all of his students are clamoring to talk to him, and which I can only assume is because he hasn't shown up in the past, 2 months.
Yeah, I always think this about Indy as well in the first movie, because he says, I'll be in my office in these 2 days. And I'm like, no, you won't. You're going to be on Cairo trying to dig up, the staff or some shit.
I mean, he has to have tenure, right? There's no way he gets away with just ditching all day if he isn't already tenured.
Well, to be fair, his buddy helps run the place, so maybe...
That's true. He finances the whole thing.
Yeah. So they know where he's going. They know, it's all, university, at least the higher-ups know about it. They know what he's doing.
Which, I guess, this is as good a part as any. I don't like that they gave Brody such a large role in this film.
I think this was a mistake too. I think he's too goofy. He's just this goofy played for laughs character, and it just. Yep. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's 1 or 2 moments that are silly amusing, but I didn't remember what happened to him, so I actually thought he might die early on, and that's why he was coming with Indy. I thought, oh, this is setting up so that he can die, and that'll motivate something. And sure enough, there is one ironic comedy cut to him that did give me a chuckle.
Yeah. Were they saying he's such a fantastic spy, you'll never find him.
He speaks 10 languages, he'll blend in, and then it cuts to him at a train station. He's like, excuse me, do you speak English? Please.
Anybody, please. I need some water. It was a good scene.
I'm awfully indisposed at the moment, I'm afraid. I don't understand what's happening. Anyway, so... Yeah, so Indy's picked up with these guys, takes them to a guy who's so obviously going to turn out to be a villain, but he's pretending not to be a villain.
I actually thought it was so clearly the villain that they were just baiting me with it. So I was trying to catch him off. I was like, no, I think that guy's a good guy because there's no way he'd be so obviously evil. Joke's on me.
Yeah, he basically hires Indy to go and look for the second half of the instructions to get to the Holy Grail.
Well, not exactly. He tells him, we hired your dad, and then he just disappeared.
Oh, okay. I'll rephrase it for you, sorry.
Yeah.
He hires Indy to do this because they already hired his dad, and he's went missing. So finish his job and maybe find your dad if you're lucky.
Yeah. I mean, there is the whole thing the entire time that Indy's basically just like, I'm only here to rescue my dad. If the Holy Grail is stupid, it doesn't exist, I don't believe in it.
Yeah.
I should, because we clearly established that God exists under the premise of the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie, but...
Yeah, he's I mean, he didn't quite see it because he had his eyes closed for obvious reasons, but he felt and saw the aftermath of the evidence that mystical forces are in fact the thing. So, but I did like the moment though, see when they're in the caves a little bit later, and they see the Ark of the Covenant on the wall, and there's a little bit of the score, and obviously the main themes and stuff have been in all 3 movies, but there's obviously some score that was only in Raiders. A little bit of the Raiders score kind of comes in a little bit.
Yep.
And he's like, "That's the Ark of the Covenant," and she's like, "Are you sure?" "Trust me."
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I'm confident.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so he heads off to Venice with Brody, who wants to tag along.
It is, I guess, worth noting here. When he was in his office, he got a package from Venice, and turns out that he finds out later this was his father's Grail diary, which holds all of the notes he ever made on the Holy Grail.
This is the final thing that says, okay, let's take the job. So they go off to Venice, which obviously we're going to play with because Venice is very famous for its water, for its canals and all that stuff. So you expect they're going to play with that. So this next bit is so Uncharted, and I know obviously Uncharted took it from this, but like I couldn't help but think of it, which is like, so they meet up with the blonde lady who's totally not a Nazi.
The fact that she's like, they do the whole thing of like, oh, it's Dr. Schneider you'll be meeting up with, and they of course assume that it's a guy, and so when she reveals herself to be a woman, it's like, oh, okay, that's a little bit of a flip. You don't quite expect that for the time, but then she immediately says like, "Hello, my name is Elsa." And I'm like, okay, German lady, I know who the villains here are. Yeah. You're not getting one over on me.
Has anyone named Elsa ever not been awful?
I mean, I could think of one, but that's only because I'm trying to get into good graces here. So,
yeah, the actress who plays this character is called Alison Doody. I just thought the name Doody was amusing.
Yeah, as soon as it popped up on screen during the opening credits, I chuckled like a 4-year-old. I'm like, Doody.
So she takes them to this library that's actually like an old church that was turned into a library. And they're looking for these Roman numerals because the journal says that it'll reveal the underground like crypt where this knight shield will be. So the thing that the rich guy that hired him for this, whose name is Donovan, so Donovan hired him. He already had a tablet. It was partially damaged, so he only had like 2/3 of it. But this is like one half of the clues. The other half is believed to be buried with the other knight because there's 3 knights. There's 3 brothers who went to protect the Holy Grail. 2 of them came back, one of them died on the way, and the other one told his story to someone. So the story he told them went into this journal thing, blah, blah. But, so there's 2 things. So it turns out to be the shield that this knight who's buried down here has the other bit clues on it, right? So we get them like figuring out the clue. Indy just casually, like, "I'll just break the floor in this public library and hope no one notices." I appreciate at the very least he looked around like he knows this is like he's not supposed to be doing this at the very least.
Here's the thing. Grave robbers have never been very good about respecting people's belongings. So the fact that he's just willing to destroy public property pretty much wherever he goes tracks for me.
But this public floor belongs in a museum.
It is in a museum. That's literally where it is.
No,
it's in a library.
A library's not a museum.
Yeah, okay, fine. Got me on a technicality there, but I still feel like it's being well preserved considering that these 700-year-old Roman numerals are just hanging around.
I get what you're saying. It's spiritually kind of museum-esque, but it's a library. So
it belongs in Britain. That's what we're saying. All of these places need to send their stuff to British museums.
I mean, they said in the first movie it was the British Museum, didn't they?
I think so. Okay. That being said, he very clearly flew out of New York, so it might be a Smithsonian. I'm not sure.
It might be. Yeah, it's interesting. So we have them sneaking down. So Elsa and Indy go down into the caverns. They're sneaking around. There's rats. There's also like waist high petroleum, and Indy's like carrying a torch, and I'm like, Indy, do you really want to be carrying fire in a pool of highly flammable?
I had so many problems with that. Like the fact that if they just found like a light little pool of oil, I think it would have been fine. But the fact that all of this catacomb is just flooded with oil, and then when they get to the scene where they actually enter the room where the knight is, you can clearly see that the rags that Indy is using as a torch start falling off while still burning. And I'm like, you should all be dead. But then I thought to myself, no. Okay, hold on. Maybe it's not that flammable. Maybe it takes a bit more than just like a single small flame to set it off.
30 seconds later.
30 seconds later.
Yeah, some guys in fezzies, I believe that's what you call those hats, they knock out Brody up top, and they come down and they set fire to the thing, and Indy and Elsa like flip over like the crypt and hide in the coffin effectively until they can like swim out and try and get out of a drain. They end up emerging in the middle of like an outdoor cafe, and all the rich Venice people are like, Mamma Mia, like, you know.
Yes, Mamma Mia. That was in the script.
So they're all very confused, but yeah, they found the information anyway. So
and they had Indy take an etching of it, like he got all the text off the shield onto a piece of paper, which I feel like should have been damaged in oil, but what do I know?
It's the least of the problems with the believability of that scene, I think. But and this is where we get, so the Fez guys keep chasing them. We end up in a boat race. Indy steals a boat, and then the Fez guys steal like the other boats that are there. We get a pretty fun couple of moments throughout all this chase. Obviously, there's the yelling and the shooting and all the rest of it, but you get she takes their boat in between two giant ships, and they're closing in together. And the boat that tries to follow them in, obviously behind, gets squished and crushed. But my favourite is the other boat where Indy's trying to interrogate the main Fez guy, and the boat is like being like basically chewed up by this propeller, and it's sort of it's like it's getting a shredder basically, and you can just sort of see the wood of the boat starting to like, you know, get destroyed gradually,
splintering and just flipping everywhere.
That's a fun moment. But the scene ends though when like Indy's like, I don't care about the holy, because this guy reveals when he's interrogated that he's part of a secret order. This is very The Mummy as well. The Mummy took this from this. Right? He's the head. Is it the head? But he's part of a secret order to stop people from looking after the Holy Grail. For the past 1,000 years, it's been safe, and his order, the Fez people, they
I think it might have been like something of the Sacred Cross, but we'll go Fez people. That makes just as much sense.
The mildly Fezzy, right?
Wow.
mild Fez.
Fez, yep.
So they go. So basically, he's like, yeah, we protect the Holy Grail. We stop anyone from getting to it, so you can't go after it. And Indy's like, I don't give a shit about the Holy Grail. I'm just trying to fight my father back. And he's like, oh, in that case, I wish you luck. And buttons up and walks away.
Basically, what he's saying is like, if your heart is true and your deeds are noble, then you are okay to search for the Grail. And I guess not being interested in it at all counts as noble and true.
Yeah, well, I guess you could also just read it as like, oh, well, once you get your father back, just stop looking and just go on your merry way. Which
I do also appreciate the idea that this guy knew exactly where Indy's father was, and he's like, oh, it's in a castle on the border of Germany and Austria, and then we get there.
Hold on.
No, go ahead.
On. That's a good point. Why does he know where Indy's father is?
I assumed that they caught him, or they at least saw him getting caught. And they like followed him or tracked him to some extent. But at no point in the movie does it give any explicit explanation of that. But
the Fez don't have Indy's father. The Nazis have Indy's father. So how do they know? I never even thought about this until you brought this up. But you're right. He's the one that tells them where they're keeping Indy's father. And it's not even like it's close by. It's literally, it's on the German-Austria border. It's pretty far away from Venice.
That's, I've looked this up, 700 miles.
Which, actually, by the way, this is a bit later, but I have to bring this up now since we brought this up. After the whole castle bit where Indy's getting his dad back...
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Right? They get to a crossroads, and there's a street sign that says, Berlin this way and Venice that way. What? There's a street sign on Austria that says, this foreign city's this way, and this foreign city's that way. Surely, if anything, you would just... That's not how street signs work. It's not like you go outside, David, and you see a street sign that's like Toronto that way and Mexico City that way.
Now, here's the thing. There are on the major interstates, like the big roads across the entire US, they do have exit signs that say like Colorado 2,600 miles. Those do exist.
That's a highway though. That is a motorway. This is a little dirt road next to a farm.
Yes, and that's why I'm 100% giving you the point there, because there is no reasonable way.
Dirt road next to a farm, a little wooden sign that's been made out of like 2 planks of wood, and thirdly, again, I can't stress this enough. These are cities in literally different countries. It's not like, again, the example, the highway that you go out on, that you're saying, oh, there's a sign for that state, there's a sign for that, whatever, hundreds of miles until, California or whatever. Yeah. That's all fine. But there's not a street sign this many miles till Vancouver.
True. I mean, I'm sure it may exist farther up north, but true. I will.
Well, yeah, at the border,
would you be more okay with it if the signs, instead of saying Berlin and Venice, instead said Germany and Italy? Would you be more okay with that?
Maybe like a tiny little fraction of a percent. But that still sounds unrealistic. I still don't believe there's a sign, especially in this location, saying this country's this way and that country's that way.
I mean, here's the thing. It's necessary for the plot. We need to show the audience that they are at an actual crossroads of where do we go? Do we go to the place where we think the book is, or do we go to the place where
No, I disagree. I don't think you do. All you have to have is have the road, have the crossroads. Their dialogue explains the choice they're making. It's not.
No, you're right. You're right.
The sign's just this weird visual bit of punctuation.
I told you that it's 700 miles. There's a reason I looked it up. It's because I agree with you 100%. It is weird that they did this, but they did it. And I think that it's more so not from they thought it was actually a good idea to have it, and more so that it helps the story.
It's also like so specific a pair. If they actually have street signs that have these 2 cities on them, shouldn't there be another 100 pegs on it with all the other major cities within a several 1,000-mile radius?
What other major cities? There are no other major cities in southern mid-Europe.
You have Venice, but not, I don't know, Rome, for example? Maybe.
Never heard of it. All they have to do is get on a road. All roads lead to Rome.
What about Spain? What about France? They don't get a sign here?
Not in Axis territory, no.
It's not really that big a deal. It's a silly little thing, but it's one of those silly little details that is so absurdly stupid that I just...
Oh yeah, it's the same sort of thing of during the Batman 66 of shark repellent. Why would he have that? And it's something that you just sit and you think about. But in the end, it's just because it's goofy. And Indiana Jones has always been a little bit goofy.
This is way goofier than Raiders.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's what I'm saying. It gets worse as the series progresses. Next movie, something crazy is going to happen, like swinging with monkeys or something. That's what I'm talking about.
Thanks for bringing the tone down of the show. We're all a little sad now and depressed. So Indy goes after his father and has to sneak into the castle. He's with Elsa. She's come along. He has his famous line where he looks down and sees some Nazis. Because up until this point, we've not actually seen any Nazis. So he's like, Nazis, I hate these guys. He was a really famous it's a gifable moment, shall we say. People have seen the gif. But he goes, he thinks he's found where his father is. He sort of climbs in through the window, and his father hits him thinking it's one of the Nazis. To which Indy rightfully points out, why would they come through the window? But he's like, quite right. Although, actually, I'm glossing over something we do have to talk about here. So when he comes in, he doesn't actually sneak into the building. He tries to get in with a charade, shall we say, a character. He tries to.
He comes in with a perfect, I dare say, the best I've ever heard Scottish accent.
So here's the thing. So obviously he's doing a terrible Scottish accent. He puts on she has a hat on that's almost like a Bonnie hat, almost, and he's doing this over the top Scottish accent, and it's all very shit and whatever and amusing. It's meant to be shit. In fact, the character even says, you're not a Scottish bit of royalty. Indy has to punch him, right? All makes sense. But given that Sean Connery's playing his father, right? Is there an implication here that they're acknowledging that his father is Scottish and therefore Indy comes... Well, he's not Scottish, but his father's Scottish.
Yeah.
They're
he
kind
has
of
Scottish blood.
Yeah, they're kind of admitting that. Because normally when Sean Connery's in something, despite the fact that he always has a Scottish accent, they'll just ignore it and pretend he's something else. Like, it's very notorious. So I thought that was interesting here, that he's maybe kind of doing this because, like, he grew up with his father, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked up. Jones is apparently the 56th most popular surname in Scotland, so it's not, like, weird that they would have been the Joneses from Scotland, but it is... I don't know. It strikes me as, obviously, his father grew up in Scotland. We don't get that much from the mother, but I think because of the fact that he was, what would you say, like 16, if even, during that opening scene?
F that, yeah. 14, 15, I would have guessed, yeah.
Because of that, I think he was raised entirely in America.
Which, honestly, given the time period, because at that time it's 1912, and when he's a teenager, like, yeah, that was a time of a lot of immigration.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
when was the Irish famine?
Oh, I don't know.
Let me look that up. That might also work. That was the 1840s. So that would have been a bit too far beforehand. But it's possible his father came over during that time as a young kid. So I don't know.
Yeah. Although we should point out here, it's not that exciting a bit of trivia. It's one of the most obvious thing that anyone ever says about this movie. But Sean Connery is only actually 12 years older than Harrison Ford.
Oh, yeah.
So, but he just
looks older, you know?
Yeah, he does. No, he does look a lot older. So, we get them. And the running thing with them is that Sean Connery, Henry cares about his work, doesn't really spend much time, like, bonding with his son. And there's kind of a running gag almost of, like, Indy doing something kind of cool or badass or, like, really impressive. And Sean Connery just not really reacting to it, and just kind of, like, he'll react a little bit the first time, and then from there, he just, like, he goes out of his way to be like, I'm not impressed.
I feel like Sean Connery's character, who, by the way, just to give him a name here, is Professor Henry Jones.
He's Henry, yeah.
He is the only person who I feel reacts to the fact that Indiana Jones, as an archaeologist, murders as much as he does.
Oh no, because the first time, obviously, when the Nazis come in the door and, like, Indy punches him and grabs the Tommy gun and just shoots them all, he's like, "Yeah, you just killed 3 people.
Yeah,
what the hell?"
And then he's like, "This isn't even my busiest day. Like, I just, this is a Tuesday."
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. There's in the first, like, classroom scene, Indy's giving a speech about how archaeology is mostly in the library, it's mostly with books, X never marks the spot, and of course later on literally an X does mark the spot.
Oh yeah, as soon as he said it, I made the remark, I'm gonna guess that X is gonna mark the spot at some point.
So he actually just is lying to his students.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, he's living the exact life they all think an archaeologist is in their wildest dreams, and he's lying to them like some sort of, I don't know.
Look, in order for Indiana Jones to exist, there has to be fewer people who want to be Indiana Jones. As soon as everybody's a grave robber, he misses out on a bunch of finds.
He's not ready to pass the torch yet, so he's going to wait another couple decades before he's willing to, like, okay, for reals, this year I'm going to teach the truth.
Yep.
Now you've all got a chance of being future me. Congratulations.
He looks around the classroom and he says, "How many of you are willing to murder in order to bring home something for a museum?"
Oh dear. So yeah, they end up getting nabbed here though, because Elsa, would you believe it, turns out to be a filthy Nazi.
Which immediately before it's revealed, Sean Connery is like, "She's a Nazi.
Yeah, don't trust her."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Indiana just basically says, like, "No, I slept with this woman. I trust her." Oops.
No, they got interrupted, did they not?
No, they went into it with the remember he was making out with her and she's like, "You better slow down, I don't like fast women," and then he just keeps making out with her.
Yeah, but then they get interrupted. It cuts back to them and there's like a noise. I'm sure they get interrupted.
No, they go through with it. It's a slow fade and everything.
Okay.
Because later on they make the remark of him saying, like, the dad's like, oh yeah, well, I can't believe you trusted that woman. And then he's like, you slept with her too. Like, he says how they basically both slept with the same woman.
Oh no, I mean, they definitely, obviously, were both involved, but none of the dialogue ever necessarily said to me that they actually slept together. Like, it definitely said like Sean Connery did, because he talks about how he knew she was a Nazi because she talked in her sleep. That's right. How he found out she was a Nazi. What is she in her sleep going, Hail Hitler?
Probably.
Oh,
can you just imagine like that really angry sounding German though coming out of someone who's asleep? Just seien Sie frei.
I do. So it's a little bit silly, but I do actually really like. So when they're tied together and they're trying to get out, and Sean Connery accidentally drops the lighter and sets fire to the place, and they're sort of nudging around on these two chairs that are tied together. They're back to back, and they end up in the fireplace. And Indys try to cut the rope with the fire poker or whatever it is, but he ends up hitting a mechanism which spins the fireplace round into a secret like Nazi operating center, and no one notices him the first time, but it's just this like funny like visual of them spinning around, noticing all these Nazis, and then spinning all the way back round again into the other room. But then of course they hit it a couple more times when he's trying to cut the rope, and eventually they notice him and they start shooting at them. Like this was a fun little bit because they set it up and then they started using it to great effect. I think the one that felt sillier to me is a couple of minutes later when Sean Connery sits in another chair and it like reveals like a secret staircase. I'm like, okay, how many secret contraptions are in this place?
I'll tell you what, man, Nazis love their secret contraptions. But yeah, no, with what you're saying on the first one, I agree that it may be zany, it may be like hijinksy. I mean, it's a rotating fireplace. It feels right out of Scooby-Doo. But it's fun. It doesn't overplay, it doesn't stay too long. It does what it needs to do for the scene. And it's even clever with it sometimes, where there's one point where like Sean Connery's trapped on one side, Indiana Jones stuck on the other side. He punches out a guard and you just see like the guard only come back, and then Sean and Indy stay on the other side. I think that was cleverly done. It was a well planned out fight scene using this as the centerpiece of it. But then, like you said, later on, it's just a random chair that he chooses to lean back on, and that feels less useful. That feels less important to the plot, and so it does just feel more hijinksy.
Yeah. So they're going to go in boats again, but he's like, nah, screw that. I'm going to like set the boat off so they think we've been on a boat, which honestly ends up not feeling like it has much of a purpose because he rides the motorbike right in front of them, so they all chase him anyway. But, whatever. Also,
I mean, the boat wasn't even that far away. They could easily just look at the boat and be like, there's nobody driving that boat.
So, yeah. But this is where they get to the crossroads after they escape the Nazis and make their choice.
Which I do think this was a decent chase scene. It's the first one that we've had just entirely on motorcycles. And I think it was pretty well done, all things considered. That being said, again, Indy really likes just murdering people because there's no one in this scene that just survives.
Nope, that is true. We have flips. We have going down off sides of mountains / cliffs or whatever it is. Yep. We got all sorts of shenanigans. So Indy's father is like, we have to go to Berlin and get my notebook back that they've stolen from us. Because it's got all the clues to how we actually do the trials. Because when you go to the Holy Grail, there's going to be 3 tests, and they're all deadly traps. We need my notes. And he's like, you didn't memorize them? No, I wrote them down so I wouldn't have to. So,
I mean, it's reasonable, but at the same time, if this is the final task, maybe remember a few of them.
Yeah. Luckily, it's John Rhys Davies' character from the first movie, Salah, actually meets up with Brody and helps him out, elsewhere. So that's all fine. So they go to Germany, which I will say, like, this isn't much of a complaint because, again, it's a fairly light-hearted adventure movie. You just sort of might go with the flow, it's fine. But I do feel like they're within, like, 100 feet from Hitler. We just cut to them being there, and, like, Harrison Ford's already, like, stolen a uniform, and, like, Sean Connery's walking alongside him. I'm like, I feel like Nazi Germany in 1938 might have been tougher to, like, get into, and, like, I don't know.
Not if you're Indiana Jones.
Apparently not. It's just the way it just cuts to him already being here. Like, damn, this was easy. Apparently,
yeah. He has guard's outfit, and he just makes his way right behind where Hitler's standing. So
yeah, we see people burning books. We see the parade, the marching in the streets, all that stuff. All capped off with Indy bumping into Hitler and Hitler taking the book. But because he was signing autographs, he thinks it's just an autograph he wants, and he signs his name in the journal.
Which I think is a fun little moment. I don't think that it's too wacky crazy or anything like that, but it is also that felt more to me like the moment that they said, you know what, if Indy's gonna go up against the Nazis like over and over again, he should at least meet Hitler once. And they just wanted to have that in this film before they wrapped up the trilogy. It didn't make a lot of sense that it happened, but if they're going to do it, I think they did it well enough.
Yeah, I think the only critique I might give it, just of a sort of more macro level, rather than like the individual moment, is that Hitler's the one secretly like wanting all this stuff to be found, right? Because he's obviously the head of the Nazis. He's the one up at the top of the food chain saying he wants the Holy Grail. I think it's interesting to have him here for a little joke, but never like have like a scene where we see him like, I don't know, like I get, if Raiders was fine, we just never see him. Like he's just this like force that we understand exists, right? We all know who Hitler is. He's this like force at the top of the pyramid, whatever. Here though, you have him for this little moment, but you don't use him in a capacity where we see that he cares about anything that's going on or wants anything. And I'm not saying that he needs to like realize this is the book or know who Indy is, but just something where we see him talk to Elsa or like whoever else he's the other main Nazi that's kind of like in the action scenes later, like just turn and like sort of speak to him. I really want the Ark, mein Führer, all that shit. Like just have a little bit where it's like he acknowledges that he's involved in the plot. Kind of. Does that make sense?
I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I think I'm more grateful that they didn't make Hitler an actual character.
Oh, the villain. Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously we want the villain to be Donovan, Elsa, and
Vogel.
That's his name, Vogel?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think we should also mention during the castle scene is where Donovan was revealed to be allied with the Nazis.
Yeah, he shows up and he's evil.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah, it was a shocking surprise. So, so the bigger task is getting out of Germany, though. Indy does run into Elsa because he gets the book off her. Holds her at gunpoint, and I thought it was interesting here. She tries to like have a little bit of like a sympathetic side where she's like, I care that they're burning books. I don't like that they're burning books, so I care about the sanctity of archaeology and preservation.
I don't care.
Like, that is a fair response.
You're still with the Nazis. Like, I understand they want to play up this mild sympathetic beat because for the rest of the movie, they still want us to pretend that there can be something between Indy and her because she is still the love interest, even after this point. But for me personally, I don't care because she's still able to just walk freely in the back of this Nazi march. Like, she's clearly high ranking. I don't like her as a person after that.
Yeah, as high ranking as a woman can be in Nazi Germany, I suppose.
Yeah.
So the Indy gets the first tickets he can out of Germany, and I feel like that's the sort of thing that in Nazi Germany they were probably keeping a close eye on, is anyone trying to leave the country, because they were very strict about controlling everything. Nazi Germany, the control freaks, maybe probably the kindest way you could put it.
I mean, the fact that they weren't Jewish, because I did a little bit of research here, and apparently 1938 was the year that like it really got bad for the Jewish population in Germany. But the fact they aren't Jewish probably means they were able to come and go as just normal citizens.
Yeah, but there's a bit of a reveal though that we're going to a Zeppelin, so we get them like sneaking about there. There's a gag here where Vogel like races on to here and starts looking. He's showing the photo of like Henry. He's like, "Hey, have you seen this man?" Blah blah. And Indy is like stolen a uniform from one of the employees on the Zeppelin, and he comes up and he ends up punching Vogel and throws him out the window. They're not flying yet. The US is just it's already all the luggage, right? So but it's a good 15 feet or something like that. You know, it's a.
Which can I just point out real quick?
Yes.
Vogel's thrown off and lands in the luggage. The Zeppelin takes off, so he is unable to get back on. Why is their luggage not on the Zeppelin?
That's a very good point. But there is a comic gag here where he turns to the crowd who are all just looking in shock, and he's like, "No ticket," and then they all whip out their tickets in fear that they're going to get thrown out the window. Which, yeah,
I swear I've seen that somewhere else. Is this the only place where that showed up? Because I swear I remember it from somewhere else.
It wouldn't surprise me if it's reused somewhere, but
I'm going to see if I can find it, because it's bothering me.
It's a decent little gag, though. Of course, though, as you'd expect, Vogel's probably called, air traffic control, and they've told the pilot to turn around. So we get...
Well, no, he specifically says that they disabled the radio on the Zeppelin, and they just realized, like, oh, we're not able to contact anybody. We should go back.
Okay. Yeah, okay. But anyway, they're turning around, so Indy and Henry have to, like, get off. So they try and steal the little biplane at the bottom of the Zeppelin. And we get a pretty extensive, like, fun sequence here where some planes come after them, and there's some chasing and all that stuff. The highlight being towards the end where they're going through a tunnel, and like they're in a car by this point, Indy and Henry, but there's a pilot whose wings have come off, like sliding on the ground, going past them.
This was like some Jack Ryan stuff going on here, man. This was full-on crazy military crap where there's no way anybody involved in the situation should still be alive, and yet here we are. Yeah.
I mean, the action's gotten more extravagant. I mean, the fact that we've even got a Zeppelin is just, imagine watching Raiders and say, oh, by the way, the next one's going to have a Zeppelin in it.
I mean, I could see it. At least they aren't. That's the thing. At least they aren't doing that thing that we complain about where they just make up the fact that tech exists.
Sure.
Like, there's no point in this where all of a sudden Indy whips out GPS and it's like, okay, but how?
Hey, if that was a plot beat that revealed that there was some time travel going on or something, like, it could be tantalizing.
You just wait. I'm still convinced that Dial of Destiny is going to have something where, like, they influence the events of the previous three, or the original trilogy. I am predicting that now.
Indy's hat was in the Ark of the Covenant all along from the future.
Yep, there you
go. So, yeah, and obviously, at this point, like, all the villains are gearing up to go and find the Ark. They're going through the desert. Our main characters are going, which, includes, like, so we've got Brody and Salah along for this trip as well. So we've got everyone making this trip. And the big set piece comes, like, basically, like, some of the villains, like, separate. So Donovan and Elsa and some goons, like, go ahead and get to, like, the temple or whatever it is first. Whereas the others, Vogel, the Nazi, we have a big set piece with a tank, right? Where, there's a bit of action, and then Henry's taken captive inside the tank. So there's a lot of action where Indy, and I think this is the best action scene of the whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the biggest one.
Yeah, Indy's, like, on top of the tank, and he's riding alongside on a horse at first. He puts a rock in, like, one of the gun barrels, so when the guy tries to fire it, it just blows up in his face. And he's on top, and I think I enjoyed some of the stuff where at certain points, because it's a tank with obviously the treads, the track treads.
Yeah.
Where, like, Indy, and then later on, actually, when Henry's on top as well, he ends up falling on it, and he starts, like, going backwards on the tracks, and it's like, oh shit. Like, there's a lot of fun use of everything this tank has to offer in this scene.
Yeah, it goes back to the conveyor belt from Temple of Doom leading into the Rock Crusher. Like, you're allowed to ride this tread right up until you fall off, and then you die.
Yes. Then you'll be crushed by the tank because it'll go over you. So fun stuff. It's got a big silly ending where, like, Vogel's in he's just got his head sticking out the tank as it's falling down the edge of the cliff.
Yeah.
And he
and
screams,
they think Indiana went down with it.
Yes, and they do this, and they play this for a surprising amount of comedy where Indy like climbs up a little bit away from them, and then comes over and looks over the edge to see what they're all looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And then they notice him. But it is an important plot beat though for Indy and his father, because Indy's father actually like feels sad that he thinks his son's dead, of course, and regrets that he never really like told him anything or taught him anything, which plays in a scene that they had in the Zeppelin where Indy complains that they never like, you know, growing up with him was tough because he never acted like a father, and Sean Connery gets all like, oh okay, I'm here now, what do you want to talk about? And Indy's like, I don't know. And he's like, well, what are you complaining about then? So he's very dismissive.
Let's talk about the Grail.
He's very dismissive, and this scene is him like realizing, oh shit, I actually care about my son. I wish I'd done more or said more, and so it's setting stuff up for our final, you know, emotional beats.
Yeah, I do on that Zeppelin scene though. I do think that was probably the best insight into Sean Connery's character, in that he didn't, you know, own up to being a bad dad or anything like that. He had the justification of, I was teaching you to be self-reliant. That was his justification of why I wasn't there, why I didn't help you through life, more or less. And I get it. I see the point of it, because obviously Indiana Jones is able to handle literally anything that's thrown at him because of this upbringing. But it does still make him a bad dad, you know? So I can see they did a good job character perspective wise of like, what are you complaining about? You're a successful professor and like have all of these adventures. Why are you upset that I did something wrong when clearly you were raised perfectly fine? But of course Indiana just wanted his dad. Yeah.
And that plays into, of course, him constantly doing impressive stuff and then Sean Connery acting like he is not impressed. You know, like it plays into that. Like he's seeking this, you know, admiration from his father, his approval, his respect. And obviously, by the end, he's going to have it, because, of course... And it also talks about, you know, they mentioned the mother, like, passed away, you know, when he was younger. And that's something that they both missed, obviously. It's part of why their relationship is this way. But it also, I think, for Indy specifically, because we've never really talked about his parents before this movie.
Yeah.
It does kind of, like, paint this idea of, like, you know, maybe why he is the way he is with women to an extent. Like, he didn't have that mother figure his whole life.
As soon as they said like his mom wasn't there and his dad was just distant, it makes absolute sense why he just womanizes everybody he comes across, because he's just looking for that affection wherever he can get it.
Yeah, what's that lady has when he meets Elsa at the start of this, where she's like, because she's, you know, has obviously...
He's like, oh, you have your father's eyes or something. It's like, well, yeah, the eyes belong to him, but the rest is all yours.
Yes. Like he's immediately turning on the charm up to like 12.
Yep.
So, yeah. So, anyway, the big thing at the end, though, is that Donovan, that dirty scoundrel, shoots Sean Connery in the stomach. And it's like, well, now you have to go and find the Grail for us, because it's the only thing that'll save him. And right before this as well, they sent in like a red shirt to try and get the Grail, and he gets decapitated. You don't see exactly what decapitates him. You just see the head come rolling out. And they're like, shit, Indy, you're getting in there to get my Grail. So
this is where the Grail notebook comes into play with the 3 trials, and the Grail says, like, oh, the first test is the breath of God, and only the penitent man must pass, and then the second test is whatever. But the point is that they don't explicitly say, here's what the test is, and here's how to solve it.
This is where the big buzzsaw comes out, and you have to like roll and duck and dive and whatever. But Indy, of course, is very good at these sort of things, so they're going to make him do it. And it is worth mentioning as well that at one point the Nazis were attacked by the Fez, right? The Fez show up and start fighting them, but they all get killed. Like the Nazis actually win the fight, but the one that we met earlier, like as he's dying, kind of like, you know, like ask Cindy or whatever, like, you know, to you know, just protect the cup, protect the Grail, blah blah blah. So yeah, but Indy goes through these trials. He ducks and dives some blades, and then the next one's just your typical stepping stone thing, where some of the stones will fall and you'll fall to your death. Yeah, yes, step in the right ones. That
may be my favorite puzzle out of just the entire Indy franchise. I think that is because it's the sort of thing that, like I said, the audience can follow along with, because they explicitly say you only knowing the name of God can cross or something like that. and they just show all these letters on these tiles, so you have to step in the way that spells out Jehovah. But then they added in the twist that in Latin, you spell Jehovah with an I instead. So he steps on the letter J, he falls through, and then he makes the same realization that his dad was making.
Yeah, I was very confused because when they said you have to step in the name of God to get across, I thought they were going to do B and then U and then S and then E and then Y.
Yeah. But that's not how you spell Brahms.
Gary Busey is the only he's the only being that I'm confused by his existence and power, that he must be
the
godlike in some way.
divinity of Busey.
Yes, because God's not inherently a good thing, and I think Busey's that level of chaos that's you know. So
I would love to see the pantheon you could come up with.
So yeah, and then the next one is like just taking a leap of faith, and it's this like optical illusion effectively, where there's a bridge that's actually, you can't see it, but it looks like it's just going to fall to your death. But then when the camera, once he steps out and it looks like he's walking on thin air, the camera changes its angle and you can see that, oh, no, there's actually a walkway there. It's just...
Right. So this is the only one I just had major problems with. In that, like, sure, from the camera's perspective, and we can infer from Indys' perspective, it looks like there's nothing there because it blends right in. If you just moved your head an inch to the left or an inch to the right, or were an inch shorter or an inch taller, this wouldn't work. So I feel like the entire thing could have been better if it were just pitch black and like you couldn't see anything, period, and you had to make a leap of faith. But they went with this, and I get it from a visual standpoint. Pitch black is nowhere near as interesting, but it doesn't work as soon as you put even the smallest bit of thought into it. Yeah,
I did like that he like throws dirt on it when he gets to the other side, so you can see it clearly.
Yeah. Although I do think he could have easily, because obviously Donovan and Elsa are following in afterwards and just imitating his steps. I do feel like that would have been the best way, where he could have been like, figure it out, screw you guys. Yeah. Instead, he left them a trail.
But of course, he gets to the room, the Grail room, and there's a knight there. So it's the third brother, the one who never left, is still here, presumably kept alive all this time because of the Holy Grail.
He gets thirsty.
Yeah. So basically, he's like, you have to pick the right cup because there's a bunch of cups in here. And Donovan comes in with a gun in his hand. He's like, no, mine, I'm going to do it. So what's funny is that I know we just had a beheading, but by and large, I felt like this one was definitely playing it a lot more safe with the PG-13. It was definitely a lot more toned down. But the one big moment, of course, is when he drinks from the wrong cup and he ages, and we get this great, like, practical stop motion, like puppet effect, whatever it is, where he ages to the point where he turns into a skeleton. And there are a couple of cuts, but there's long stretches of seeing him transform, so you feel that you're seeing it properly. And then eventually he smashes against the wall when Indy pushes him away. It's
I thought they were going to keep doing that cut thing, like you were saying, where it's like every time we cut back to him, he's just a little bit older until eventually he just is a skeleton and we just see him drop dead. But no, they did that whole long sequence where he's grabbed hold of Elsa and is just aging in stop motion, and
it was good.
I'm trying to think if there's anything from Temple of Doom that was like more than that, and I don't think there really was. I think that this probably is like the standout. This is going back to that moment in Raiders where they opened up the Ark and then everyone melts. Yeah,
this is very much this movie's version of that. But they both look good and they're both memorable and distinct. I mean, Temple has the heart rip out, but I think that's a little bit different because it's like, one, it's got that magic. I mean, these are both kind of magical too, but like the magic hole opening so the heart can be taken out does make it feel a bit hokier, I think. Whereas these both like go, they keep going until they're so absurdly disgusting that they work.
It's the problem of with the magic heart opening hole, you don't have any frame of reference for that as just a normal person. Like you don't understand, is that painful? Does he feel that? How, like, what's going on there? With the Raiders and this one, you get your skin melts off, man. There's no world where that feels good. Not to mention, Temple of Doom had the guy just kind of take it. In Raiders in this, they're screaming. They're yelling. They are in pain.
Yeah, makes it way more horrifying. And maybe it's just as simple as, they're screaming in pain, and that's all you need to make it sell it. So obviously gets the cup. He figures out the right one because he's like, well, Jesus was a carpenter, so there wouldn't one. And sure enough, he's right. So he takes that back to save his dad. It does. And then Elsa carries it over the threshold, which the knight warned them not to do. And sure enough, the entire place starts to crumble and implode because she's overstepped. But there's an important bit here where she falls to her death in this crevice, and Indy's still trying to reach the cup, and it's actually his father who says, let it go.
Okay, so just to really frame that sequence, though, ground's opening up, Elsa falls down.
Yes.
Indy has her hand, and she's still trying to reach the cup. And he's like, no, just let it go. I can't hold you with just your one gloved hand here. And eventually the glove comes off. She falls to her death. Because of that, Indy falls into the crevice. His dad grabs his hand. And then Indy also tries to get the cup, which that's the part that I was a bit unclear on, because he was just telling Elsa, leave it or you'll die. And then when he's in the same situation, he's like, but I mean, it's right there.
I think it's right there. I think the idea they're playing with maybe is the temptation of it, because it's, this mystical, it's having an effect on him kind of thing. But it's a big character beat for his father to say, no, leave it. It's not important. Like, we're important. You're important. Because this whole thing, this whole movie is that he ignored his son because he was obsessed with finding the Grail. So for him to say, no, leave it, it's more important that we both live, or that you live, is like, that's the end of the arc of the movie. It's the the actual
and
story.
That's the moment that I was hinting to at the very beginning of this that I felt was just a really well done moment in terms of character.
Yeah, no, that's good.
They set up this whole thing and it pays off in the perfect way of this was this man's obsession for his entire life. And it's only now that he finally is able to theoretically get it that he says, nah, it ain't worth it.
Yeah. So it's a meaningful moment. It makes the story between the two of them work, which makes the movie as a whole work. So on top of the fun set pieces, even though they have the sillier edges at points, it's got good set pieces with a lot of practical effects. There's still rear screen moments. There's still like other types of effects, but there's a lot. Like it's not as good as Raiders in that sense, but it's much better than Temple, I think. Although the main car chase is very good. Like it's one of the standout scenes from that movie.
I mean, I would say that this movie doesn't have as much action as Temple of Doom, but I do think that the points where it has action, it's more intense.
I actually think it's about the same amount of action. It just feels like there's less because there's more story in between the action scenes.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, this is an extra 15 minutes longer than Temple was.
And there's a lot more context for the plot. And the plot's a lot more, it actually has more of a plot as opposed to just they stumbled into this and now this is the plot of the movie.
Like, I guess that's what my Saturday's going to be spent doing. All right.
But, you can tell this was kind of envisioned as the last one because they literally ride into the sunset at the end.
Yeah. Well, Steven Spielberg apparently had a 3-picture deal with Lucasfilm. So he was like, all right, this is it. This is me wrapping up the contract.
Yeah. And it did well. I remember 1989. I mean, I don't remember. I was literally just born at the time. Yep. But whenever I hear people talking about this time period, like 1989, and it was like the biggest summer for movies in a long time. It kind of like escalated because Batman came out that year, Lethal Weapon 2 was a big hit that year, and then Last Crusade, and it was. I don't know if it was the first time there was multiple blockbuster tentpoles in one year. Obviously now it's like we get it every year, but. Spielberg kind of started the blockbuster craze with Jaws in 75. This is 14 years later. And now they're at the point now where people are expecting 3 or 4 big movies every summer. And now, like that would just obviously just keep going up. And now all years is blockbuster season. Like there's no off season pretty much at this point.
It's like 2 weeks in February. That's about the only time you don't get a blockbuster. Yeah, I did look up real quick. You were actually like 2 weeks old when this movie came out. It was May 24th, 1989.
Yep, I was 2 weeks old. There you go.
Yep. And I was just a gleam in my mother's eye.
Your mother's or your father's eye?
Both.
No, it's a really solid sequel, and I think it plays on everything you like about Raiders, and it uses it to a reasonably well extent. You know, it is a little bit zanier, like you said. You know, I would have used the word maybe sillier in places, but I don't think it's ever as silly as Temple was. It feels a bit more reined in, and at least when it is sillier, it tends to come from a more natural chemistry between Ford and Connery, as opposed to, you know, like the fish out of water stuff with Willie in the last movie, or whatever. Because, don't get me wrong, there's some outrageous action in this. The fact that they even had the idea, let's do a Zeppelin scene, is a little outrageous. But at least when they're jumping from the Zeppelin, they're in a plane. They're not in like an inflatable life raft.
See, for me, what it is that I do think that this movie, if we're using the zaniness scale here, I do think that it is, as a whole, less zany than Temple of Doom. But I do think that when it gets zany, it has higher peaks of zaniness.
Okay.
Mainly because of Brody. It feels like every scene he's in, he's just Mr. Magooing it. No,
I agree. You know, there's a lot of awkward comedy with him. And one or two bits, like we said, that ironic cut to him being useless is a little bit funny. But I would agree that like he could have just not came. Like just having him there to set up the plot, and then, much like the first movie, just have him there at the start. But I guess they wanted to include him a bit more, A, to have the comedy, B, so that they could have this send-off where all of the characters are riding into the sunset at the end.
Yeah.
So...
I do want to ask, though, before we get too much in the end, the actual final scene of this movie is the reveal of how he got the name Indiana.
Oh, before they ride off, yes.
Yes.
Because obviously one of the other running things of the movie is that Henry keeps calling him Junior, which Indy keeps saying, "Don't call me that. I hate that name." And you know, Sala I think says, "Why do you keep calling him Junior?" He's like, "Well, because that's his name. He's Henry Junior." And he's like, "What about Indiana?" And he's like, "That's what I named the dog."
Yep.
And he's like, you took your own name from your dog?"
He's like, "I like that dog." So I guess my question is, with how much we were talking about the beginning of the movie going into all the things that made Indiana, are you okay with this being revealed at the end of this and making it something as simple as he got it from the dog?
This one doesn't bother me that much because it's not done in the flashback, right? It's his friend still calls him Indy in the flashback, so he was already using that name. That's already what you want people to call him, clearly. But like this isn't a big deal to me, especially since that it's like all throughout the film he keeps calling him Junior, and you're like, but your name's not Indiana, so how is he Junior? So they've seeded it throughout the film, and it's just kind of a silly thing where he picked Indiana. This is like, what would be way worse to me is if in the flashback scene he like says he hates his name, and then he looks up and sees a map of Indiana and goes,
yeah,
like that's the sort of moment that would make me like just like vomit with disgust.
Yeah, I get it. It's the Solo moment.
Yeah.
Hearing
it in hindsight, when it's already an established thing to these characters, but they kind of bring it up because it's like a natural bit of the conversation, that will mostly always be okay, just because it's not a big deal. It's not presented as a big moment. The problem is that things like, "This is why I'm going to call you Han Solo" from the Solo movie, it's like they're going for the dun dun dun, and this is how he got the name, swelling music. It's a big, it's a big beat where, but that's the thing. This movie is guilty of that just for other things. It's guilty of that for, this is how he gets the whip the first time. This is how he gets the hat. This is how, like, all these things. This is how he gets scared of snakes. That stuff is way more egregious. And don't get me wrong, this is from a time period where it was much less done, so I'm sure it's not that big a deal as a whole. And because Indy is a pulpier franchise, you get away with it a bit more than a more straight-laced, serious set of characters. I will acknowledge that. But at this point, I'm so sick of these types of things and prequels and things like that I've just
the soft reboots and all that.
Yeah. Or even just reading comics and like how often they'll do like, "Oh, let's go back to the past and show how."
Did you know that when Batman was in that alley, there were actually 75 other people?
That's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Last Son of Krypton, except those other 85 people who also left Krypton at the same time.
In fairness, they tried to fix that with Crisis. They tried to make it so he was the only Kryptonian left, and then they realized, okay, but like, we need other ones.
Yeah, and I'm okay with Supergirl. Like I'm perfectly okay with Supergirl, but
yeah,
there's so many Kryptonians that keep popping up. It's just it's just nuts. So yeah, but hey, like it is a really solid sequel. It's fun. It's got the adventure bits down. The puzzles are more fun. It's easy to hate the Nazis, of course. The tank scene is a good bit of fun. The Zeppelin, as silly as the idea is also a fun time. And more than anything else, it nails the character story for Indy and his father and their journey by the end. So it's good. It's a good sequel.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said there. I do, like I said at the beginning, think that this is the most cohesive plot. I feel that every beat clearly led into the next one. It never felt like there was just, oh, we have to do this thing now. Like, I think if this were written in the same style as Raiders or Temple, it would be they get out of the castle and then they're just going to Berlin. They don't explain why they're going to Berlin. They just end up in Berlin. Whereas this scene took the time to not only explain why they are going to Berlin, but they also took that time to have the character moment of explaining, like, here's what's in the notebook. Here's what happened to the mother.
Took it too far with that stupid sign.
Yes, true. But I'll blame the set decorator for that more so than the script.
There's like 5 close-ups of it. Like Spielberg, he cannot say, oh no, I'm not accountable for this. No. You put it in the movie, multiple shots. Like this is on you.
I'm saying it might not be in the script. Once it gets to this thing, yeah, fair enough. But I may not be in the script. So, yeah, no, I mean, like you said, it's a solid sequel. It's a good follow-up. I can't really see the side of people who think that Lost Temple is better than this. Like, even if they...
Lost Temple?
Yes, the Lost Temple. And the last...
The Temple
Raiders.
of Loss.
Yes, all of those. You know what I mean. The Temple of Doom. I can't see any point where they were going to be saying that this is better. Clearly, some people do, but I just can't get in that mindset. This is just clearly better.
When they reboot Indiana Jones, they're going to call it Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Last Temple. That's what they're going to call it.
The Raiders of the Last Doom. The Crystal Raiders of the Last Doom.
Oh, you think they're going to include Crystal Skull in this as well? Okay.
I mean, they got to call back to everything. See, that's the thing. It's a rolling window of nostalgia. Okay. So by the time they reboot it, people are going to be nostalgic for the Crystal Skull film.
Well, okay, sure.
Yeah.
People who belong in an asylum, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. I guess we're at the point where we're going to rate Last Crusade. Sure. But clearly, it is a really strong sequel. It's a fun time. It's not as iconic or as important as Raiders is, but yeah, really good. So
yeah, I mean, just based off everything we've already said, I don't feel like I really need to explain it that much more. I'll just go ahead and say I'll give it an 8. It is way above Temple, not quite as good as Raiders, obviously, but still very solid film.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go just a smidge lower at a 7.5. I think in the past, when I was younger, I probably would have just thrown it an 8. I think as I'm watching it now, like I'm really enjoying it. I'm having a fun time. But I wouldn't quite say it's a great movie. I think it's good. I think it's really good. But 8 to me is where it crosses into great territory, and I don't necessarily think I can quite give it that. But it is a really good sequel, and it's well worth watching if you like Raiders. And let's face it, most people just watch the whole series anyway. But
oh yeah.
But it's really good stuff. So well worth your time, and much better than Temple of Doom. Haters, don't at me.
No, at me. It's good for engagement. Everyone at. So I guess the question is, though, does it make the cut?
This is interesting. This is an interesting placement for this one, because obviously we're saying it's good, right? And I guess this is where we kind of fundamentally get to the thing where, is it being good, like all it requires to get in, like, to make the cut, right? Because there's an argument, and the same way, this is kind of the flip of it, but in the same way that, when Time does its Person of the Year, it's not necessarily because for good reasons, right? And likewise, we've put a couple of, films on extra reels, like way into the cut.
Because absolutely.
They're worthy of it. So I guess what I'm saying is there a possibility here where something that rates about here, in the sort of 7s to 8s range, where we're saying it's good, but is it notable?
See, for me, I always think of it in terms of an actual collection of if I am getting this film, do I think it is worth having in a permanent media? Like I want to be able to say I have this for the rest of my life.
What did we give Raiders?
Raiders we put above. Raiders was a cut above.
That's fine.
I think this one makes the cut. I don't think it. I was already kind of borderline with giving Temple of Doom cut from the collection. I think it may have squeaked out a 3, but you were very dead set on 2, and I wasn't going to argue that point.
Whoa, don't confuse this with giving them numbers, right? We've already got a numerical 10 scale.
I have to put in numbers on the spreadsheet to make this all work.
You're confusing the system here.
My bad. I think it almost could have squeaked out.
Cutting it close,
but you argued the opposite, and I was fine with that. But I do think that this one is good enough to make the cut.
I think making the cut. I don't think there's any realm which this is a cut above. I think this is just makes the cut.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Okay. I agree 100%.
All right, well, it makes the cut. And then next time we'll see if Crystal Skull...
Should I just fill it in right now? I just put in the number?
Well, no, because I don't know how low we're going, because keep in mind here. So for everyone who's not familiar with this scale, when we have to agree on this cut thing after the number ratings, is we have a cut above, which is exceptional, top of the line. We have makes the cut, which is it's in. We have cutting it close, which is it kind of just maybe squeaks in, but it's it's border.
It's up to preference,
right? And then you've got doesn't make the cut
from the collection.
Cut from the collection. And then you've got, what's below that?
That is cut your losses.
Cut your losses, right? And then at the very, very bottom, there's it cut deep, right? So there's 3 levels of just out, negative to really bad to I will kill whoever did this to me, right? That's the 3. So I don't know how, it's definitely going to be in that bottom half, I think, but I don't know where it's going to land in that. I've only seen it the once. I saw it in theaters in 2008, and I've not seen it since.
I have seen it several times, unfortunately. So this will just be a refresher for me.
Part-time. So yeah, that's what's coming next time. Of course, it'd be a good time to tell you about all the bonus things you can get if you join our Patreon, and you get bonus content every month. We have a bonus episode at the $3 tier. For Indiana Jones season, we did a bonus episode on the Phantom. Which is the Billy Zane and Indiana Jones style superhero kind of thing. We also have extra reels, which is at the $5 and up tiers, and that is So Bad It's Good movie, and also kind of fitting the indie theme this month. We don't usually try and tie them in, but this one kind of just did by accident. We did Sinbad: The Battle of the Dark Knights, which is horrendous.
Yeah.
So you can check out that if you're a patron, and that's. I don't know what we've got a good 5 of those now. We've got a good 7 bonus episodes.
We're up on that, yeah. So we got a good amount.
The bonus content's piling up, and of course the other shows that are on Mail Fuzz Movies, the Atomic Cinema Experiment and Screams After Midnight, they have 40 and 50 bonus episodes a piece now. So the content you get on there is building up. So if you want to support everything and get some goodies for it on a regular basis, you can do that. And don't forget to check out our new monthly Criterion show where we review a Criterion movie. On Collector's Cut The Collection. So that started last month, and it's some classy cinema. So
I think our second episode came out at this point already.
It might have done. I wasn't going to bring it up just in case, but
I mean, this is coming out beginning of July, so it must have come out by now if it's a June episode.
Oh yeah, I'm forgetting where these things come out. This is why I just keep it vague though. You're trying. David tries to overcomplicate the schedule so we can pinpoint exactly where anything is at any given time, and I'm like, just don't bring it up. It's fine.
I'm sorry. I thought somebody here was all about these charts.
I am, but there's a level of which we don't have to know about it. It's okay.
Okay.
So that's the stuff you can go check all that stuff out. But that is the show. Thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and I don't know. What did I say? cuppeth from the drinketh the everlasting life, but hopefully not Connor. Bye, guys.